LSU hosted their spring game in Tiger Stadium on Saturday, and the biggest takeaway, the biggest story, the biggest headline of the day is probably exactly what we expected it to be all along.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's up, y'all? Welcome into Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, on your preferred podcast platform, and on YouTube as well. And a quick shout out to the Locked On production team for that fire intro. All of my everydayers out there, you might have recognized. New tune, new intro. So shout out to the Locked On production staff, giving a little renovation, a little facelift to the podcast. They absolutely crushed it. Today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. So that's why LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. So the spring game on Saturday in Tiger Stadium. And as you know, all my everydayers out there, and if you don't know, I'll introduce you to the rule that we have on this program, that you do not get too high and you do not get too low based off of what you see or hear about or read about in practice, because it's just practice. And that's essentially what Saturday was, right? It was practice. It was just practice that happened to be televised and happened to be in Tiger Stadium and happened to be in a 7-on-7 format. That's really all it was. So whatever I'm about to say, couch it with it was the spring game. Couch it with it's April and we start playing football in September. Couch it with that's not what things necessarily are going to look like when you play USC in Las Vegas on Labor Day weekend. Just keep that in mind, right? I think we all, as sports fans, have a tendency, and specifically football fans, specifically at this time of the year, when we are all just starving for football, when we all just want fall to get here so badly, and we hang on to every single word that coaches or coordinators might say. We hold on to every single sentence put out by the beat writers from practice. We just want football so badly. But I will urge you, and I will challenge you, don't get too high and don't get too low. But with that being said, there's still plenty to take away from a spring game, because first and foremost, that's all we have at this point in the season. As long as you can hear it, you can digest it, you can take what you want from it and understand it's still spring, and there are still things that are subject to change. With that being said, let's start with my biggest takeaway. What looks like the greatest strength for this team, at least right now on April 15th, coming off of the spring game. And frankly, what I think we all kind of expected to be the strength of this team. And it's the offense. And more specifically, it's Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier was fantastic on Saturday in Tiger Stadium. 7 for 7 for 187 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. He was airing that thing out. And it wasn't just gunslinger, just chucking it downfield, an epic Kyren Lacy's down there somewhere, just tossing up 50-50 balls. No, it was, I see my guy open, and he's open 50 yards downfield, and I'm going to hit him. And it's going to be a touchdown. I mean, and those numbers, 7 for 7, 7 attempts, 187 yards. That's 27 yards per attempt. I know we all grew accustomed to the air it out offense that we saw from Jaden Daniels last season. I don't think that was just a one-off last season, and now we're going to have to get used to just dinks and dunks on every single down. Garrett Nussmeier's got an absolute cannon of an arm, and he's also got the receivers that can get downfield to take advantage of it. So first and foremost, Garrett Nussmeier found Zavion Thomas, Mississippi State transfer, for a 45-yard touchdown pass. And it was the first touchdown of the game. Zavion Thomas was wide open, which there's another side to that, but we'll get into coming up next. Zavion Thomas was wide open. They found themselves doing a little duck, duck, goose in the end zone, a little touchdown celebration. Don't know if that's going to be allowed in actual gameplay, but I liked it, and it was fun. And then found Kyren Lacy for a 59-yard touchdown pass. Garrett Nussmeier, beyond just the numbers, which the numbers themselves are incredibly flattering. The numbers themselves, I don't really know how much you could ask for more. I don't know if you could ask for better. I think it's you script that kind of outing for any quarterback in any situation, spring game or not. But beyond that, he looked confident. He looked in control. He looked poised. On a Mailbag Wednesday last week, one loyal Locked On listener, which I appreciate you all, mentioned to me in a Twitter DM, like, look, I'm nervous about Garrett Nussmeier. What if he's not ready? What if he's not, what if he's not the guy day one? What if he's not prepared to take over this QB1 role? I get the fear. I get the inherent anxiety that comes with passing the torch at the quarterback position, specifically when that torch is being passed from a Heisman Trophy winner that quarterbacked one of the most explosive offenses in LSU history. I understand a little bit of that anxiety, but I don't know how you could watch first and foremost Garrett Nussmeier in his outing against Wisconsin, where he just looked mature. He just looked confident. He just looked like, this is my job, and I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability. And you're gonna put pressure on me, and I'm gonna stay calm, cool, and collected under that pressure. I think we also saw it on Saturday as well. I want to continue to get into what we saw offensively beyond just the starting quarterback, what we saw from the backup quarterbacks, what we saw from the run game, which is one of the biggest mysteries, maybe isn't the right word, but one of the biggest question marks that we all have going into the season, and specifically in spring ball, and also what I think is going to be this greatest strength, the position of greatest strength for LSU going into this upcoming season. And we'll get into that coming up next after just a few words from our sponsors. I want to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. Hey, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. So the radio station that I worked for, we actually used LinkedIn Jobs whenever we had a producer opening, and I can personally attest to this. LinkedIn is not just like any other job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, and it's even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, then you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Like I mentioned, the radio station that I work for, we hired a producer on LinkedIn Jobs, and it was such a quick and easy and painless process, which if you've ever done hiring in the past, you know that is not always the case, that it can be so quick and so painless. But post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we are part of the Locked On Network, your team every single day. And speaking of the Locked On Network, it's Locked On's NFL Mock Draft live on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern, streaming on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Find the ultimate 6-episode series on April 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern to hear who the local Locked On experts are picking for every NFL franchise, with live reactions from local college football experts and even the fantasy football angle. The Locked On NFL Mock Draft on April 17th at 7 Eastern, streaming live on Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. I can't believe we're already here. It's almost NFL draft time. We're less than 2 weeks away. I feel like we've been talking about Jayden Daniels and Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr., Mekhi Wingo, Mason Smith, all of these LSU draft hopefuls. I feel like we've been talking about them for months and months and months. Finally, almost here. All right, let's continue to break down LSU's spring game on Saturday. The biggest story to me, the thing that stood out the most to me, was the thing that expected to probably be the biggest story. And that, of course, is the quarterback. That was Garrett Nussmeier, who had a fantastic day and showed off exactly why he's getting the nod as QB1. Exactly why I think myself and also you as well as an LSU fan, you should feel like this offense is in really good hands, because everything that I have seen, everything that I have heard, Saturday included at the spring game, leads me to believe that this offense is going to score a lot of points. And a big reason of that is because of Garrett Nussmeier. And like I said, we don't get too high, we don't get too low. But what we saw on Saturday, I think, just solidified what we already probably knew. And that's that it's Garrett Nussmeier's time now. Like this is his offense. And what they want to do in the passing game, you've got the quarterback to be able to do it, and you've also got the receivers to be able to execute that. And that is exactly my point coming up next here. The wide receivers were on full display. Like I mentioned, a 59-yard touchdown catch from Kyren Lacy. I think Kyren Lacy is going to be your wide receiver one. And I don't think that's really a bold statement in the slightest. I don't think that that's a hot take, that Kyren Lacy throughout spring practice has solidified himself in that number one role. Now, again, it's April. You don't play football until September. So there's absolutely time for another one of these receivers, whether it's a Chris Hilton or whether it's a Zavion Thomas or a CJ Daniels, two of your transfers, to emerge and to compete with Kyren Lacy for that number one spot. In fact, I think they should try to compete with Kyren Lacy for that number one spot, because if you've got a team full of number one wide receivers, like, they're probably in pretty good shape, right? Like you're probably in a pretty good position. But Kyren Lacy, like Garrett Nussmeier, continues to solidify what we believed would happen and what we kind of picked up on little breadcrumbs throughout spring practice that probably would come to fruition, is that Kyren Lacy is going to be your guy. Another thing that I noticed from Saturday is you're going to see a lot of rotation from these receivers. Was that just a spring game thing, just to let guys get a little bit of work in, to knock the rust off a little bit, to get some action in a game-esque setting, to avoid injury, to not, keep a guy in there for too long? Or was it a more of a peak of what we can expect from this receiving room? That I don't know the answer to. But if it is a peak of what's to come from the receiving room, meaning it's going to be a solid and deep rotation at receiver, I think that's a great thing for this LSU offense. And Brian Kelly even mentioned that in his post-game press conference. He said, look, we can have this constant rotation of 4, 5, 6 guys. We're always going to have fresh legs. We're not going to have a guy out there that's just absolutely gassed and not being able to play at, 110%. We can constantly be rotating guys in and out and not feel like we're going to take a step back and not feel like, oh, well, we don't have our best 11 on the field, because there could be up to 6 receivers that could fall into that category of quote unquote best 11 on the field. So we saw a decent bit from Zavion Thomas. Like I mentioned, he had the 45-yard touchdown pass, a guy that when he came in, CJ Daniels included, we saw Brian Kelly kind of take that approach with transfers and young players of, look, our veterans that have been around here, they're going to get the BOD, the benefit of the doubt. They are going to get the first opportunity. Any opportunity that you get, you're going to earn. And I think Zavion Thomas and CJ Daniels, while CJ Daniels has been working a little bit more with the second team offense, I think you're going to see them in that rotation of those wide receivers. Again, of course, along with Kyren Lacy, along with Chris Hilton, and along with Aaron Anderson as well. We saw Aaron Anderson getting involved early in the passing game. I think you're starting to see that relationship start to build between Garrett Nussmeier and Aaron Anderson, him being more than just playing in a special teams role. I don't expect Aaron Anderson to be your one, nor do I really frankly expect Aaron Anderson to be your 2, but I think he could be a really, really solid option in the slot along with Zavion Thomas. That's where we've seen a lot of Zavion Thomas is working in the slot. So he gives you, speed and just experience at an incredibly important position. Let's talk run game because that has been going back to the beginning of spring football. That's been one area that I've been really intrigued to see unfold. Why? Because your run game has been Jaden Daniels. The last 2 seasons, your run game is Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels has been your leading rusher the last 2 seasons. So, what does a Jaden Daniels list, Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, Joe Sloan, Cortez Hankton, offense look like? And it's not just in theory, what does it look like? Because obviously it looks like a lot less QB runs. It looks like a lot less quarterback just taking off with the football because there's not a look there and because he can. What does that look like in terms of personnel? The personnel that you have available? Do you have one go-to bell cow back? Is it going to be a running back by committee? Do you have the personnel to run more of a running back by committee? Right now, you've got Caleb Jackson and you've got Josh Williams. So, put an asterisk by that because that's not going to be your running back room going into the season. You got Caden Durham, the 4-star running back coming in. He was not an early enrollee, but you'll get him in the summer. And then also don't forget about Trey Hawley. Throughout his ongoing legal proceedings, if he's cleared and if it cleared legally and then cleared by LSU to come back, then he will get back into the program and he'll be, a fixture and a rotational part of this running back room. But for now, it's Caleb Jackson and it's Josh Williams. And both look like really exciting pieces to this run game. Caleb Jackson had a 32-yard touchdown run in the spring game. He's so powerful. Gosh, he is so fun to watch. I get glimpses of Leonard Fournette when I watch him. And no, he's not Leonard Fournette. I'm not saying he is, and I'm not saying he's going to be. But I get glimpses of that big body bruising running back that can just, stiff arm the defense, but has the speed, the downhill speed, but also has the body size. Like I love everything that I see from Caleb Jackson. But let's keep in mind, he's only a sophomore. That Caleb Jackson can't be your go-to only really running back. But that's where Josh Williams comes in, because Josh Williams brings that veteran presence, that reliability that you want at least early in the season. Because let's be honest, Caleb Jackson, for as young as he is and as rather inexperienced as he is at this level, you don't want to have to rely on him game one, snap one. You're the guy, don't turn the ball over, run the heck out of the football. Like it's a lot to put on his plate if it doesn't need to be. And with Josh Williams in the fold, it doesn't need to be. He's a veteran guy that can carry you until Caleb Jackson is ready to carry a majority of the load. So it's the Caleb Jackson and the Josh Williams show for now. But again, Caden Durham coming in and the Trey Hawley situation, a little bit up in the air. But you've got an exciting, young, explosive piece and a reliable go-to guy in Josh Williams. And I think makes it a nice pair as a running back duo. I still don't think it's enough. Like it still gives me anxiety how few running backs LSU will go into the season with. Like 4 just doesn't feel like enough. And it's 4 maximum. That is considering that Caden Durham is going to be ready to contribute for you year one. That's assuming that Trey Hawley is cleared and can come back and is in game shape by week 1. Frankly, I don't know if those are assumptions that I can make right now. So I like the pieces that you have. I just don't feel like it's enough. So that's going to be a continued conversation that we're going to have throughout the spring, throughout the summer. What does the run game look like? And what are the roles for these running backs in that run game? We'll continue to take a look at that. But I think another important note is none of these things are possible without the offensive line. That you're not going to have a robust run game without a solid offensive line that can run block. Like Garrett Nussmeier isn't going to be able to lob balls down the field 60 yards to Kyren Lacy for a touchdown if your offensive line can't pass protect. So all of these conversations that I'm having about how I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to have a massive year, about how I think Caleb Jackson and Josh Williams are a nice running back duo, how I think that this offense is going to put up a lot of points, that's all with the understanding that you've got an offensive line that can do that. And I don't think that we talk about that enough. Frankly, I'm guilty of that. I don't talk about that enough. That you've got probably the best tackle duo in all of college football, that you have so much experience returning on the offensive line, 4 of 5 starters returning, that everything that this offense wants to do, I feel pretty confident about them doing it because with the underlying, assumption that the offensive line is going to be able to protect. So another thing that I want to make sure I put out there, because those big men with their hands in the dirt, they don't get enough love. So we understand that there is no glass half full without a glass also being half empty. So let's address that half empty glass coming up next. It's playoff time in the NBA and NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets, guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and so easy to use. So if I'm looking, I'm placing a couple hockey bets coming up here. The Dallas Stars are playing like one of the best, if not the best team in the National Hockey League. I'd look at placing a little bit of money on the Dallas Stars, but if you're not as optimistic as I am about Dallas, take a look at the Vegas Golden Knights. The Golden Knights still have an opportunity to secure the wildcard 1 spot in the West and get a more favorable matchup, most likely with Vancouver. And they've got two fairly easy matchups coming down the stretch here against Chicago and Anaheim. And I think that Vegas is going to be motivated to get that number 1 spot, especially against the level of competition that they're going to see over these next couple of games. But what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. Again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, rolling along here, Locked On LSU. Thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. It was so fun watching this LSU offense on Saturday in the spring game. And I know it's a spring game. Brian Kelly even opened up his press conference by saying, like, what do you know? It was a spring game. Like, we're not going to live or die by a spring game. And I have a rule on this podcast, and it's a rule that we're going to continue to emphasize as we go throughout the offseason. And that rule is nobody gets too high and nobody gets too low based off of what they see in practice. One reason why I really kind of implemented that rule for myself and now for the podcast is because it's really easy to look at the glass half full in practice. For example, if the offense looks great in practice, it's really easy to focus in on how great the offense looked rather than thinking, well, does that mean that the defense isn't very good? And vice versa, right? If the defense just dominates the offense, you can look at, oh my gosh, this defense is going to be unstoppable. But it would be really easy to overlook the fact that maybe your offense just isn't very good. So it's almost impossible to tell. You can assume and you can guess, but it's tough to tell a lot of times in practice who really won the day. Was it good offense and bad defense? Was it good defense, bad offense, so on and so forth? That wasn't the case on Saturday, however, because it was pretty obvious which side of the football was really freaking good and really freaking talented and knew exactly what they wanted to do versus the defense that looked pretty freaking bad and looked pretty freaking confused. So let's not forget here that the defense looking bad is just as much of a story as the offense looking good. Another thing that I have to couch that with is you're not hitting the quarterback. So perhaps there are throws that Garrett Nussmeier made in the spring game that wouldn't have been made if there's a 290-pound defensive tackle coming to just take his head off. Like, that's not going to happen in a spring game. Things that happen in a spring game might not happen in real life and vice versa. So keep that in mind. I don't know if that makes you feel better about the defense. I don't know if it makes you feel better about the offense. Frankly, I think it's something that we should keep in mind, but not something that I'm going to give the defense a pass for. Like, we saw Harold Perkins get recorded for a sack, which is great. You want to see that. You want to see Harold Perkins continue to take strides and at least steps in becoming that true linebacker position. But your corners have busted coverage all day long. Corners were getting beat all day long. Like I mentioned earlier in the show, Zavion Thomas was wide open for a 45-yard touchdown pass. That wasn't because of scheming on Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton's part. That was because it was busted coverage. Like, Kyren Lacy was wide freaking open for a 59-yard touchdown pass. Well, that's because the corner couldn't keep up with Kyren Lacy. And look, I feel really good about these receivers. I think that this could be one of the top receiving units in the SEC. So that makes you feel excited. Wow, our wide receivers are so good that our defense can't even keep up. We all saw the defense last season. We all have reason to be overly sensitive about the defense. That if this is the defense that LSU fielded, like let's say tomorrow was the very first game and that was the defense that you saw, like LSU is going to have to score 75 points because they might give up 70. Like it might be that ugly. Because it kind of looked that ugly. I'm not going to lie. Kind of looked that ugly in the spring game. Now, the positive thing is you don't play football tomorrow. The positive thing is there's a lot of progress to be made from April until September. There's a lot of practices to be had. There's a lot of improvement that can be made and frankly needs to be made if LSU wants to get past that 10-1 hump, if LSU wants to find themselves in a college football playoff. Defensive tackle room, they need bodies bad. The corners, the DBs, they need improvement. I think we could be encouraged by what we saw from sophomore cornerback PJ Woodland. I think that we can be encouraged by the rotation, perhaps, of that cornerback room. We saw a decent bit of Zavion Thomas. We saw a decent bit of Ashton Sams, but we also saw Ashton Sams get burned in the spring game. So there's improvement to be made. There's strides that are going to have to be made over the next couple of months because, frankly, I don't know how much more of this elite offense and trash defense I can take. Like, I don't know if I can watch another elite LSU offense go wasted because the defense can't wrap up and tackle. That was another problem on Saturday. Missed tackles. I can't watch any more of that. I can't do it. And I'm encouraged about Blake Baker and Kevin Peoples and Bo Davis having Corey Raymond back into the fold. I'm encouraged about this defensive coaching staff. I am. I think this defense is going to be better than it was last year because I, right now, believe in the coaches more than I did last season. But I'm gonna have to see more than what I saw on Saturday. Again, we don't get too high and we don't get too low on what we saw in a spring game. But it's not just what we saw in the spring game. It's what we've seen from this LSU defense, unfortunately, over the last 365 days. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on the run game. Backup quarterback battle is another one that we're going to keep an eye on. And we'll get into that on tomorrow's edition of Locked On at LSU, and we've got a ton to get to. LSU baseball swept at Tennessee. I said a couple weeks ago, don't hit the panic button. It's not time. We're hitting the panic button. This team stinks. WNBA draft is tonight, and Angel Reese is in New York City. We'll break down her draft position, where she's headed, what she can bring to the WNBA, in addition to more spring game breakdown on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.